There's a generation that's almost impossible to place. They remember exactly what it felt like when phones had cords, when you had to memorize someone's number by heart, and when missing your favorite TV show meant you'd missed it forever. But that same generation was also the first to open Messenger, the first to build a MySpace page, the first to watch the iPhone arrive and change everything. Psychologists still argue about where to put these people, because they're not quite Gen X, but they're not really millennials either. If you were born somewhere between 1976 and 1985, you probably belong to what some researchers started calling, a few years back, the Xennials, a kind of micro-generation squeezed between two worlds. And the interesting part isn't the label. It's what actually happened during those years. Because that tiny window of time created something psychologists find genuinely rare. A generation that learned two completely different ways of living before they even turned 30. You grew up in a fully analog world, a world where boredom couldn't be fixed with a screen. If you wanted to see your friends, you called their house and hoped their parents picked up. You agreed to meet somewhere specific, a square, the front of the movie theater, the bus stop, and then you just waited, because there was no way to send a heads up. If you were running late, you couldn't text, "On my way." You either showed up or your friends left without you. That kind of life demanded something that's almost vanished today: trust and commitment. If you said you'd be there at 6, there was a very good chance everyone actually was there at 6. But right as you were stepping into adulthood, the world flipped. And it didn't change slowly. It changed all at once. In the space of a few years, you got cell phones, the internet at home, Messenger, MySpace, Facebook. Maybe you still remember the Messenger nudge, customizing your MySpace profile, spending hours changing your status, hoping one specific person would read it. Suddenly, there were dozens of ways to reach anyone, and your generation just adapted. And there's a real psychological reason for that. According to a lot of research on brain development, the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that helps you adapt to new situations, doesn't fully mature until around age 25. A study published in Nature Neuroscience showed this region keeps developing well into your 20s. So what does that mean? It means when the digital world exploded, a lot of you were sitting right at the peak of your brain's plasticity. Young enough to pick up the technology fast, but old enough to remember, perfectly, what the world was like before it. And that creates something strange, a kind of cultural bilingualism. Older generations sometimes look at technology with a bit of suspicion. They didn't grow up with it. Younger generations never knew a world without the internet at all. But you lived both realities. You know how to have a face-to-face conversation without checking your phone every 10 seconds. And you also don't panic when you have to learn a new app. You remember what it felt like to be completely unreachable for hours, something many younger people have never experienced. But technology doesn't intimidate you either. And that mix builds a very particular mindset. Take your relationship with privacy. You grew up in a world where embarrassing moments faded with time. That terrible haircut in high school, that party where you made a fool of yourself, that dramatic teenage breakup. All of it just lived in people's memories. Not online, not in photos, not in videos, not on social media. And that changes, deeply, how you remember your own life. Research on autobiographical memory suggests the human brain is built to edit. Over time, memories shift, simplify, get reinterpreted, turn into stories. But when everything is permanently documented, that natural process gets a lot harder. And you lived right at the transition point. Here's another detail almost nobody mentions about this generation. A lot of you walked into the job market during the 2008 financial crisis, right when you were trying to build some stability. And that leaves a mark. Research on financial stress shows that money troubles at that stage of life can create a lingering sense of insecurity, years later, even after things improve. So many people from this generation developed a particular relationship with money, a blend of adaptability and caution. You learn to move through a changing world, but there's still a small voice in the back of your head that sometimes whispers, "What if it all falls apart again?" And here's the big paradox. You grew up before the era of hyperprotective parenting. Your parents often had no idea where you were for hours at a time, and that was completely normal. You learned to entertain yourself, to solve your own problems, to sit with boredom. But you reached adulthood right as the internet promised to connect everyone, before any of us understood that connection would bring its own problems too. So this generation lives in a kind of permanent contradiction. Independent, but connected. Skeptical, but open to change. Analog, but digital. And maybe the strangest part is that you can hold all those contradictions without feeling out of place. You remember something other generations never lived. You remember the before. And that's why you can see, clearly, what was gained, but also what was lost. You lost the ability to disappear for a few hours. You lost the patience that comes from waiting. You lost a certain presence of mind that existed when nothing was constantly fighting for your attention. But you also gained something huge: instant access to information, global connection, opportunities that simply didn't exist before. Maybe that's why so many of you carry this odd feeling, the sense of not quite fitting in anywhere. Too young for some things, too old for others. Like you always arrived right in the middle, between two worlds. And maybe that's exactly why so many people from this generation have a rare skill. Understanding that the world changes, but your identity doesn't have to get lost in the process. Because in a world that's moving faster and faster, having already lived through one massive historical shift might be one of the most valuable skills there is. Knowing how to adapt without losing who you are. If this hit a little too close to home, you probably already know why. And if you want to understand more about the psychology behind how we live, how we think, and how we make our decisions, go ahead and subscribe. This is exactly the kind of thing we dig into here. See you in the next video.